My name is Sasha Fitzpatrick. I was 24 years old when my parents handed me a newborn baby that wasn't mine and told me to figure it out. No warning. No preparation. No choice. My sister Felicity was 17, a junior in high school, and according to my mother, she had a future worth protecting. I was the older one. The responsible one. The one who could handle things. So they handed me a baby wrapped in a hospital blanket, pointed me toward the door, and went back to protecting Felicity's future. That baby was Marcus. And 19 years later, at his high school graduation, he stood at a podium in front of 300 people and told them everything. Every single thing. And not one person in that gymnasium was prepared for what came out of his mouth, including me. Before I take you back to the beginning, if stories about family, sacrifice, and the truth finally coming out are the kind of thing that keeps you up at night, do yourself a favor and hit subscribe. Drop a comment and tell me where you are right now and what time it is. Because what I am about to tell you is the kind of story you are going to want to share with someone the moment it's over. Let me take you back to Bowling Green, Kentucky. Population just under 75,000. The kind of city that feels like a small town wearing a medium town's clothes. Everybody knows somebody who knows you. The same families show up at the same churches, the same Friday night football games, the same 4th of July cookouts in Basil Griffin Park. Your business is never entirely your own in a place like that. And in my family, appearances were a religion. My mother, Carol Fitzpatrick, ran the household the way a general runs a campaign. Precise, strategic, always thinking 3 moves ahead. She was a bookkeeper for a local insurance firm, neat handwriting, color-coded files. A woman who believed that a well-organized life was a well-lived one. My father, Dennis, was a floor supervisor at a plastics manufacturing plant on the edge of town. He was not a complicated man. He worked, he came home, he ate dinner, he watched television, and he agreed with whatever Carol had already decided before he walked through the door. Felicity was 6 years younger than me, and she was, without question, the centerpiece of our family's ambitions. She was the kind of pretty that made adults talk too much and say the wrong things. Bright eyes, easy smile, the sort of natural confidence that teenagers either grow into or grow out of. My parents looked at Felicity and saw possibility. They looked at me and saw reliability. I was the one who made sure the permission slips got signed, the one who drove Felicity to volleyball practice on Tuesday afternoons, the one who helped her with geometry homework at the kitchen table while Carol watched her shows in the next room. I want to be clear about something before we go any further. I loved my sister. Loving someone and being used by your family as their safety net are two different things, and for a long time I confused them. I thought being useful was the same as being loved back. It took me years, and one very specific Monday morning in November, to understand the difference. I was 24 when everything changed. I had graduated from Western Kentucky University 2 years earlier with a degree in social work. I had a job at a nonprofit on the east side of Bowling Green, a 1-bedroom apartment on Chestnut Street with a second-hand couch and a window that looked out onto a parking garage, which I thought was just fine because it was mine. I had plans. A licensing exam I was studying for. A promotion I was 3 months away from being eligible for. A life I had built quietly and carefully with no help from anyone. Felicity was 17 and a junior at Bowling Green High School. She had a boyfriend named Cody who drove a lifted truck and wore his baseball cap backward in every photograph. He was not the kind of boy you brought home to Carol Fitzpatrick, so naturally Felicity never did. The call came on a Monday. It was early November, just past 7 in the morning. I was standing in my kitchen in socks and a sweatshirt, drinking coffee before work, when my mother's number lit up my phone. Carol never called before 9. I answered immediately because a call that early from Carol Fitzpatrick meant something had already gone wrong. She did not say hello. She said, "You need to come home. Tonight. After work. Do not tell anyone." That was it. I spent the entire workday with a stone sitting in the bottom of my stomach. I filed intake forms and made phone calls and sat through a staff meeting and smiled at the right moments, and the whole time that stone did not move. I drove to my parents' house in Bowling Green after my shift, still in my work clothes, still carrying my bag. The house was too quiet when I walked in. Carol was at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. Dennis was leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, looking at the floor the way he always looked at the floor when Carol had already told him what to think. Felicity was not downstairs. I could hear the television in her room through the ceiling, volume low, the way she kept it when she wanted people to think she was fine. Carol did not waste time. She slid a folded piece of paper across the table toward me. I opened it. It was a printout from a clinic. 14 weeks. I looked up at my mother. She looked back at me with the expression she used when she had already made a decision and was simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. Cody was gone. That was the first thing she told me. He had stopped responding to Felicity's messages 3 weeks ago. His family had moved to Nashville apparently, and nobody had thought to mention it to anyone. Felicity had known about the pregnancy for 6 weeks before she told my parents. 6 weeks of sitting on that information alone at 17 years old. When I thought about that, when I really let myself sit with it, my chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with what my mother was about to ask me. Carol laid out the situation the way she always laid things out, methodically, without sentiment. An agency was an option but would require documentation that could become public record in a town this size. Keeping the baby meant a teenage mother in the house, which Carol said she would not have, not because she was cruel, she told me, but because it would derail everything Felicity had worked toward. She used the word derail. Like Felicity's future was a train and this baby was something on the tracks. Then she looked at me. You have a stable job. You have your own place. You are the responsible one, Sasha. You always have been. I remember the refrigerator humming. I remember the clock above the stove reading 7:14. I remember thinking that I had heard my mother say the words responsible one my entire life, and that until that exact moment I had always taken it as a compliment. I asked to speak to Felicity alone. Carol hesitated, then nodded toward the stairs. I found my sister sitting on her bed with her knees pulled to her chest, wearing an oversized hoodie, her hair pulled back, her eyes red at the corners. She looked young. Not teenager young. Young in the way people look when something has happened to them that they do not yet have the vocabulary to describe. I sat on the edge of her bed. I did not lecture her. I did not ask about Cody. I asked her one question. What do you want, Felicity? She looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked at the wall. I want it to not be happening, she said. That was the most honest thing anyone said in that house all night. When I came back downstairs, Carol was waiting. Dennis had not moved. I asked what would happen if I said no. Carol's answer was immediate. We contact an agency by the end of the week. The baby goes to a family we don't know. Felicity goes back to school. We don't speak of it again. I stood in my parents' kitchen and I thought about a baby going to strangers while Felicity went back to volleyball practice and Cody drove around Nashville in his lifted truck and my parents went back to their color-coded files and their television programs. I said yes. I do not regret saying yes. I want to make that clear right now, even knowing everything that came after. I said yes because the alternative was a child disappearing into a system while everyone in my family simply moved on. I said yes because I was 24 and I still believed that doing the right thing would eventually mean something to the people who asked you to do it. I drove home that night with the clinic printout folded in my jacket pocket and a feeling in my chest that was not quite fear and not quite grief but something that lived between the two. My apartment felt different when I walked in. Smaller somehow. Like the walls had already begun adjusting to accommodate what was coming. I sat on my second-hand couch in the dark for a long time. Then I went to bed, set my alarm and went to work in the morning. Because that was what I did. I handled things. 3 days later I called my mother and confirmed what she already knew I was going to do. She said good and moved on to logistics. There was no thank you. There was no acknowledgement of what I was giving up. There was just Carol Fitzpatrick moving on to the next item on her list. Marcus Allen Fitzpatrick was born on April 3rd at 6:22 in the morning. 7 pounds, 1 ounce, a full head of dark hair, and the most exhausted-looking face I had ever seen on a person who had only been alive for 4 minutes. The delivery took 9 hours. Felicity was brave in the way that people are brave when they have no other option. She gripped the side rail and breathed and pushed and did not ask for anyone to hold her hand, which was the part that broke something small and quiet inside me, because she was 17 years old and she should not have had to do any of it alone. Carol was in the room. She stood near the window with her arms folded and her eyes on the clock. Dennis waited in the hallway. I was the one beside Felicity through every contraction, counting with her, telling her she was doing fine even in the moments when I was not sure that was true. When Marcus arrived and the nurse cleaned him and wrapped him and asked who wanted to hold him first, Felicity turned her head toward the wall. Carol did not move from the window. The nurse looked at me. I stepped forward and took him. 7 pounds, 1 ounce. His eyes were sealed shut. His fingers were the size of pencil erasers. He made a small sound like a question, and then he went quiet the moment I held him against my chest, like the question had been answered. The nurse asked who was taking him home. The room went silent in the specific way rooms go silent when everyone already knows the answer but nobody wants to be the one to say it out loud. I said I am. And that was that. 2 days later I carried Marcus into my one-bedroom apartment on Chestnut Street. I had a second-hand crib a coworker had donated, a bag of newborn diapers I had bought the week before, a borrowed baby monitor, and absolutely no idea what I was doing. I had read 2 books and watched a series of online videos and felt completely unprepared anyway, because nothing prepares you for the specific reality of a newborn at 3 in the morning when it has been crying for 2 hours and you have work in 5 and you are standing in your kitchen in the dark trying to remember if you burped him properly. Marcus had colic. I did not know what colic was until I lived inside it for 4 months. Every evening between 7 and 11 he cried. Not fussed, not whimpered. Cried. Full volume, relentless, inconsolable crying that bounced off the walls of my one-bedroom apartment and settled into my bones. I walked circles around the living room holding him against my shoulder, patting his back, humming things I half remembered from childhood. I became an expert at functioning on broken sleep. I learned to eat dinner standing over the sink in under 4 minutes. I learned that a shower at 5 in the morning before he woke was the only reliable shower I was going to get. I called my mother once on a Thursday night in June, when Marcus had been crying for 3 straight hours and I was sitting on the bathroom floor with him in my arms because the acoustics were better in there somehow. I was still in my work clothes. I had not eaten since noon. Mom, I said when she picked up, I need help. Just for a weekend. Just so I can sleep. Carol's voice was steady and unhurried. You made this choice, Sasha. You are a grown woman. Figure it out. She hung up. I sat on that bathroom floor for another 20 minutes and then I figured it out because there was nothing else to do. Felicity started her senior year that August. Carol bought her a new laptop for school and a pair of sneakers she had been asking for since spring. Nobody bought Marcus anything. I covered his pediatrician appointments out of pocket because my nonprofit job came with thin benefits and a high deductible. I bought his formula in bulk when it went on sale. I cut my own grocery runs to 3 items a week when money was short, which it was most months that first year. In October, I filed for legal guardianship through Warren County Family Court. The paperwork was straightforward. Felicity signed the voluntary relinquishment forms at my parents' kitchen table on a Saturday afternoon. She signed quickly without reading all the way through, the way people sign things when they want the thing to be over. Carol witnessed it. Dennis notarized it because he had gotten his notary certification years ago for reasons I had never understood until that moment. I drove the documents to the courthouse myself, filed them in person, and kept a certified copy in a manila envelope in the drawer beneath my bed. Marcus was mine. Legally, fully, completely. I held that piece of paper in my apartment that evening after he had gone to sleep and I read it twice, slowly, the way you read something you want to be absolutely certain is real. My name on every line. His name. The stamp from the court. I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope and slid the envelope into the drawer and I did not cry. I had cried enough. It was time to just be his mother. Felicity graduated from Bowling Green High School the following May. Carol planned a party at the house, catered sandwich trays, a custom cake, streamers in the school colors. 40 people came. I was not invited. I found out about the party from a cousin who texted me a photo by accident. In the photo, Felicity was laughing, holding a glass of sparkling cider, wearing a white sundress, looking every bit the version of herself my parents had always been working toward. She looked happy. I'm not saying that to be bitter. She genuinely looked happy. I looked at that photo for a long time, then I put my phone down and went to check on Marcus, who was 8 months old and had just learned to roll from his back to his stomach, which was the most impressive thing I had seen all year. Felicity left for the University of Louisville that August on a partial academic scholarship topped up by my parents' savings. The same savings account that did not have room for Marcus's co-pays or his first pair of proper shoes. Carol called me the day Felicity moved into her dorm to tell me how well the room had come together. I was in the middle of a diaper change. I told her that was great and that I had to go. The early years of Marcus's life exist in my memory as a series of specific moments rather than a continuous film, because that is how survival works. You do not remember the whole stretch of exhausting ordinary days. You remember the bright particular moments that made the exhaustion mean something. Marcus at 10 months, pulling himself upright against the coffee table and standing there with an expression of absolute astonishment at his own achievement, like he could not believe his legs had agreed to participate. Marcus at 14 months saying mama, which I was told by every parenting resource I had consumed was not necessarily directed at me but which was absolutely directed at me, and we both knew it. Marcus at 3, sitting at the kitchen table with a fat crayon, drawing what he told me was a dog but which bore a stronger resemblance to a thundercloud with legs. He narrated the entire drawing process with the seriousness of a documentarian. "That is the tail," he said. "That is the other tail." I asked why the dog had 2 tails. He looked at me like I had said something deeply foolish. "Because he is happy," he said. I stuck it to the refrigerator with a magnet and it stayed there for 2 years. There was a woman named Diane Okafor who lived 2 floors above me in the Chestnut Street building. She was in her 60s, recently retired from the school district, and she had grandchildren she saw every other weekend and missed every day in between. She started watching Marcus on Tuesday and Thursday mornings when he was 8 months old, at first just as a favor, then as a regular arrangement at a rate I could actually afford. Diane was steady and warm and completely unimpressed by chaos, which made her the ideal person to hand a colicky infant to when I needed to get through a full day of work without falling apart. I do not know what the first 3 years of Marcus's life would have looked like without Diane Okafor. I try not to think about it. My parents visited twice in Marcus's first 2 years. Both visits were brief and performative, the kind of visits people make when they want to be able to say they showed up without having to stay long enough to actually help. Carol held Marcus for approximately 4 minutes during the first visit, declared that he had Felicity's nose, and then spent the remaining hour reorganizing my kitchen cabinets without being asked. Dennis sat on the couch and watched a football game. They left before dinner. Neither of them asked how I was managing. Neither of them offered anything practical. Carol did leave a casserole dish on the counter on the way out, which I will acknowledge was something, even if it felt more like a receipt than a gift. Felicity did not visit at all. She sent a text message on Marcus's first birthday. It said "Happy birthday little guy" with a balloon emoji. I read it standing in the kitchen while Marcus sat on the floor behind me systematically removing all the board books from the lowest shelf, which was his preferred afternoon activity. I looked at that text for a moment, then I set my phone face down on the counter and went to sit on the floor with my son and help him put the books back so he could take them off again. That was the most time either of us had ever spent with something Felicity sent him. It would not be the last time I found myself having to explain, in age-appropriate language and without editorializing, why the woman who gave birth to him was present in theory but absent in every way that actually counted. Marcus started kindergarten at Richardsville Elementary on a Tuesday in August, wearing a blue backpack that was almost as wide as he was and carrying a SpongeBob lunchbox. He had selected himself with the seriousness of someone making a major financial decision. I walked him to the classroom door. He looked up at me once, adjusted the strap on his backpack and walked straight in without looking back. His teacher, a kind woman named Mrs. Patton, caught my eye over his head and smiled the smile of someone who had watched hundreds of mothers stand in that doorway trying not to fall apart. I made it to my car before I cried. That counted as a win. By the time Marcus was in 2nd grade, I had left the nonprofit and taken a case management position at the Warren County Department of Community Services. The pay was better, the hours were more predictable, and the work was the kind that kept me honest about what actually mattered. I spent my days helping families navigate systems that were not designed with their dignity in mind, and I came home every evening to a 7-year-old who wanted to tell me everything that had happened since 8 in the morning in precise and exhaustive detail. I never told him I was tired. I always listened. It was around this time that Marcus started asking the questions I had been quietly preparing for since the day I brought him home. They came the way his questions always came, sideways and at unexpected moments, wedged between ordinary things. We were in the car on the way to the grocery store on a Saturday when he asked why his last name was the same as mine but different from his friend Cooper's, whose last name matched both his parents. I told him that families were built in all kinds of ways and that ours was built the way it was because I loved him and had chosen him, and that was the whole story as far as I was concerned. He thought about that for the rest of the drive, and then he asked if we could get the cereal with the marshmallows, and I said no, and he accepted that with more grace than he accepted most things at 7. The harder question came when he was 9. We were eating dinner on a Wednesday, pasta with Jared sauce because it had been a long week, and Marcus looked up from his plate and asked me directly why he did not have a dad or a birth mom who lived with us like other kids did. I put my fork down. I told him the truth in the version appropriate for 9 years old. That he had been born to my sister who was very young and not ready to be a mother, and that I had stepped in because I wanted to and because I loved him before I even met him. I told him his birth mom lived in another city and had her own life. I did not editorialize. I did not say anything I would have to walk back later. He was quiet for a moment, twirling pasta around his fork. Then he said, "So you picked me?" I said yes. "Exactly that. I picked you." He nodded like that settled something that had been loosely arranged in his mind for a while. Then he finished his dinner and asked if he could watch television, and I said yes, and he went to the couch, and that was that. Children have a remarkable capacity for absorbing hard information cleanly when you give it to them straight and without drama. Marcus was proof of that over and over again. Felicity, during these years, was becoming a success story by every external measure. She graduated from Louisville with a degree in communications, moved to Nashville, and landed a junior marketing role at a mid-sized firm that she climbed with what I was told by Carol was impressive speed. By the time Marcus was 8, Felicity had been promoted twice, had an apartment downtown, and was, according to Carol's quarterly life updates, absolutely thriving. Carol delivered these updates the way someone reads from a press release. All forward momentum, no texture, no acknowledgement of anything that existed outside Felicity's highlight reel. Marcus's name came up in these calls approximately as often as the weather. Carol would ask how he was doing in the distracted tone of someone who has already moved on to the next item, and I would give her a brief honest answer, and she would say that's good and pivot back to Felicity. I stopped expecting anything different around the time Marcus turned 6. Adjusting your expectations is not the same as giving up. It is just choosing not to spend your energy on a door that has been locked for years. Felicity called me directly for the first time since Marcus was an infant when he was 10 years old. I was at my desk eating lunch when my phone rang with a Nashville number I did not have saved. Something in me recognized the area code and the specific quality of the silence before she spoke. "Such it's me." Her voice was different from how I remembered it. Polished, measured, the voice of someone who had been professionally developing herself for a decade. She did not ask about Marcus. Not his name, not his grade, not what he was into or whether he still had that laugh that filled a room from corner to corner. She called to ask if I still had a box of her things she thought she had left at my parents' house and that Carol thought might have ended up with me during a move years ago. A box of old journals and some jewelry. I told her I did not have it. She said okay thanks and hung up. The call lasted under 2 minutes. I finished my lunch. What I did not tell Felicity was that Marcus had drawn a picture of our family for a school art project that same month. It was displayed in the hallway outside his classroom during parent night, 30 small framed drawings by 30 fourth graders, each one labeled in the child's own handwriting. His showed 2 figures, one tall, one small, standing in front of a building I recognized as our apartment complex on Chestnut Street. The tall one had curly hair like mine. The small one had his arms up like he was celebrating something. Underneath, in his careful blocky print, he had written my family. 2 people. Our building. That was his whole answer to the question of what a family looked like, and it was completely accurate. I got my social work licensure when Marcus was 11. I had been working toward it for years around the edges of everything else, studying after he went to bed, taking the prep course online in 30-minute increments, rescheduling the exam twice because life intervened in the way life does when you are doing everything alone. When I finally passed, I called Diane Okafor, who had moved to be closer to her own grandchildren 2 years earlier but who still answered on the second ring. She hollered loud enough that Marcus came running to see if something was wrong. I told him I had passed a very important test. He said, "Nice job, Mom," with the specific brand of 11-year-old sincerity that sounds casual but means everything. Nobody from my family called. I had stopped expecting that too. Marcus was 12 when he asked me the question I had been half dreading and half waiting for since the day I sat him down at 9 and told him the simplified version. We were on the back porch on a Sunday evening in September, the kind of Kentucky evening where the air finally forgives you for the summer, cooling down just enough to make sitting outside feel like a reward. He had been quiet all afternoon in the particular way that meant something was working itself out in his head. Then he turned to me and said, "Does my birth mom ever ask about me?" I looked at him. He was 12, sharp-eyed, already reading people with a precision that made most adults uncomfortable. There was no version of a soft answer that he would not see straight through. So I told him the truth. "She has not called to ask about you, no. Not once." He absorbed that without visible reaction, which was its own kind of reaction. Then he said, "Is it because of something I did?" And that question hit me somewhere so specific and so tender that I had to take a breath before I answered. "Oh," I told him. It is not about you at all. It never was. It is about where she was in her life when you were born and where she has stayed ever since. That is her story, not yours. Your story is this porch and this house and every single thing we have built together since the day I brought you home." He was quiet again. Then he leaned over and put his head on my shoulder briefly the way he did when he was small, just for a second, just long enough to mean something. Then he sat back up and asked if we had any of the good chips inside, and I told him to go check, and he went inside and I sat on that porch alone for a few minutes and let myself feel the full weight of what had just passed between us. The thing about raising a child who is perceptive is that you cannot protect them from the truth. You can only make sure they are standing on solid ground when they find it. Marcus had always been standing on solid ground. I had spent 12 years making sure of that, quietly, without anyone watching, without anyone thanking me for it. And on that porch in September, with the Kentucky air finally cooling down and the sound of him rummaging through the kitchen cabinet looking for chips, I understood for the first time that I had done it. Not perfectly. Not without cost. But completely. He was mine and I was his, and every year of difficulty had been the price of something that could not be purchased any other way. Marcus made the honor roll for the first time in 6th grade and did not stop making it after that. By the time he was in high school, it was simply a given, the kind of thing that stopped being a surprise and became a baseline expectation, not because I pushed him toward it but because he had developed his own internal standard that had nothing to do with my expectations and everything to do with his own. He was the kind of student teachers remembered years later. Not because he was loud or showy, but because he was genuinely interested in things, and genuine interest in a classroom is rarer than most people realize. His freshman year he joined the debate team on a dare from a friend and discovered he was unervingly good at it. He had a quality in an argument that I recognized because I had watched it develop over years of dinner table conversations and back porch questions. He did not get louder when challenged. He got quieter and more precise, which is far more effective and far more unsettling to the person on the other side. By sophomore year he was competing at the regional level. By junior year his coach told me at a parent meeting that Marcus had the kind of mind that could do anything with itself and that the school was lucky to have him. I drove home from that meeting and sat in the parking lot of our apartment building for 10 minutes because I needed the privacy. It was during Marcus's sophomore year that Felicity got engaged. Carol called me on a Tuesday evening to deliver the news the way she delivered most news about Felicity, with the breathless energy of a publicist announcing a major signing. His name was Grant Holloway. He was in commercial real estate. He was from a good family, Carol said, which in Carol's vocabulary meant a family with clean gutters and a framed diploma above the fireplace. They had been together 14 months. The wedding was being planned for the following spring. I said that was wonderful news, and I meant it in the uncomplicated way that I had learned to mean things that had nothing to do with me. Felicity's happiness was not my enemy. Her absence was not something I had ever wished for her to suffer. I had simply learned to exist in a parallel lane, close enough to see the road she was on but not waiting for her to merge into mine. What changed things was a phone call 6 weeks before the wedding. Not from Felicity. From Carol. She started with the usual framing, a preamble about how Grant was a wonderful man and how Felicity was finally in a stable place and how the family was so happy. Then she said, "Grant wants children. He has always wanted children." And Felicity told him about Marcus. Carol paused there, deliberately, the way she always paused when she wanted the weight of something to land before she continued. She told him about the situation, Carol said. About how complicated things were. About the choice she had to make when she was young. I stood at my kitchen counter and listened. Marcus was in his room doing homework. I could hear his music through the wall, low and steady. Grant is very understanding, Carol continued. He thinks Felicity was brave. He wants to meet Marcus. He thinks it could be a beautiful thing for the family. And Felicity, she is ready now. She is in a good place. He wants to be in his life. I noticed my mother had called me Myra. She had not done that since I was in trouble as a child. She only reached for the wrong name when she was nervous. I let the silence sit for a moment before I answered. Does Grant know she signed away her legal rights? I asked. Does he know she sent the forms from Nashville without reading them? Carol's voice shifted. That is not relevant anymore. It is very relevant, I said. Because what you are describing is not a reunion. You are describing a reintroduction. And Marcus is 17 years old. He does not need your permission or mine to decide whether that is something he wants. Carol told me not to be difficult. I told her I was being precise, which was different. She told me to think about what was best for Marcus. I told her I had been doing exactly that for 17 years without any assistance from anyone on this phone call. She hung up. I stood at the counter for a moment, then I knocked on Marcus's door and told him dinner would be ready in 20 minutes and he said okay and I went back to the kitchen and finished making it. I did not tell Marcus about that phone call immediately. I needed to think about how much of it was mine to pass on and how much of it would simply become weight he had to carry during a year that was already demanding enough. He was in the middle of junior year, debate regionals were 6 weeks out, and he had begun the early stages of college research with the focused intensity he brought to everything that mattered to him. I did not want Felicity's timeline imposed on his. 3 weeks later he came to me himself. He knocked on my bedroom door on a Sunday afternoon and stood in the doorway holding his phone. She followed me on Instagram, he said. I looked at the screen. A profile with a professional headshot, a Nashville location tag, 1,100 followers. The bio said communications professional, dog mom, forever grateful. She had sent a follow request and a direct message. Hey Marcus. I know this might be unexpected. I've been thinking about you a lot lately and I'd really love to connect if you're open to it. There was a heart emoji at the end. I read it twice. Then I looked at Marcus. He was watching me with the expression he always used when he was gathering data before forming a conclusion. What do you want to do? I asked. He leaned against the doorframe thinking. Is she getting married? He asked. I realized then that he had already done his own searching, had probably found her profile before she found his, had already looked at the photographs and drawn his own preliminary conclusions. As I said. To someone named Grant. He nodded slowly. And he wants to meet me. It wasn't a question. I told him yes. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I did not try to fill it. Then he said she didn't want to meet me for 17 years and now someone she wants to impress does. I did not confirm or deny that. I did not have to. He was 17 and he had his mother's capacity for precise observation and he had arrived at the accurate conclusion entirely on his own. He accepted her follow request and sent a short reply that said thanks for reaching out, hope you're doing well. Polite, bounded, non-committal. He put his phone in his pocket and went back to his room. 2 weeks before graduation Carol called again. She had heard from Felicity that Marcus had responded to her message and she wanted me to know that the family was planning to attend the graduation ceremony. All of them. Carol and Dennis, Felicity and Grant. Carol said it in the tone of someone announcing a generous gesture rather than describing an imposition. Felicity wants to celebrate him, Carol said. She wants him to know she's proud of him. I asked if Felicity had any idea what Marcus's GPA was, what he had placed at debate regionals, what he was planning to study in college. Silence. Carol said those were details Felicity was looking forward to learning. Those are things she would already know, I said, if she had been paying attention for the last 17 years. I was not angry when I said it. That is the part that surprised me. I had expected to feel the old familiar heat when this moment finally came, the version of this conversation I had been half rehearsing in the back of my mind for years. But what I actually felt was something closer to tired clarity. The kind of feeling you get when you have been carrying something for so long that you no longer notice the weight until someone asks you to put it down and you realize you don't know how. Marcus found out they were coming the same evening. He came into the living room while I was reading and sat on the couch across from me and said Felicity texted that she's coming to graduation with her fiancé. I told him I knew. He picked up the television remote, turned it over in his hands without turning on the TV. Are you okay with that? He asked. I told him it was his graduation and whoever he wanted there was the right answer. He said that wasn't what he asked. I put my book down. I told him honestly that I had made my peace with it a long time ago and that the only thing I cared about on that day was watching him walk across a stage and knowing that every single year of the work we had done together had been worth it. He nodded. Set the remote down. Then he said, I've been working on something. For the ceremony. I asked what it was. He shook his head with the small private smile he used when he had already decided something and did not need input. You'll hear it when everyone else does, he said. I told him that was not a fair policy. He told me it was the only policy he was offering. He went to bed. I sat in the living room for another hour, listening to the house settle around me, thinking about the fact that in 2 weeks my son was going to walk across a stage and begin the part of his life that I had spent 19 years building the foundation for. Whatever Felicity and Grant and Carol and Dennis brought with them to that gymnasium, they were walking into something they had not built and did not own. That gymnasium belonged to Marcus. And whatever came out of his mouth on that stage, I already knew one thing with complete certainty. It would be exactly right. Graduation morning came in the way that mornings come when you have been waiting for them too long. I was awake before my alarm, lying in the dark listening to the neighborhood ease itself into the day. Garbage truck 2 streets over. A dog somewhere. The specific stillness of a Kentucky morning in late May before the heat remembers what month it is. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table and did not turn on the television or look at my phone. I just sat there with the quiet and let myself feel the full size of the day before it started. Marcus came downstairs at 7 wearing his button-down already tucked in, hair neat, shoes clean. He had ironed his own shirt the night before. I had watched him from the hallway without saying anything, the same way I watched him learn most things, close enough to catch him if he needed it, far enough back to let him succeed on his own. He sat down across from me. I made eggs. We ate in the easy silence that 2 people build over 19 years of shared mornings. I asked one more time if I could hear the speech. He smiled into his orange juice. You'll hear it when everyone else does. Same answer as every time. I cleared the plates. He went upstairs to get his cap and gown. When he came back down he was holding the manila envelope from beneath my bed, the one with the guardianship papers inside. He set it on the kitchen table. I want to bring this today, he said. Because it's the proof. Then he tucked it inside his gown and picked up his keys. The gymnasium at Bowling Green High School holds just over 350 people. By the time my friend Renata and I found our seats in the 4th row it was already close to capacity, families filling in around us with programs and cameras and the particular restless energy of a crowd that knows something significant is about to happen and is not quite patient enough to wait for it. The school band was warming up near the back wall. The seats on the floor were filling with graduates in blue and gold, a long organized river of young people who had just finished the first version of themselves and were about to start the next one. I smoothed my dress and folded my hands in my lap and looked at the stage. Renata squeezed my arm and said, "You made it," and I nodded because I did not trust myself to say anything more than that yet. Then the side doors opened and I saw them come in. Carol first, in a floral blazer, holding her purse with both hands the way she held things when she was performing composure. Dennis behind her, tie slightly crooked, eyes already scanning the room for the nearest exit. Then Felicity and beside her Grant. Felicity had dressed for visibility. Deep burgundy dress, heels, hair down. Grant was tall, broad-shouldered, navy blazer, the relaxed confidence of a man who had not yet learned that the story he had been told and the story that was true were not the same story. They found seats 3 rows behind me. I did not turn around. I knew they were there the way you know when a change in temperature has moved through a room. Before the ceremony started, Felicity made her way to the staging area. She found Marcus and hugged him, both arms, the kind of hug designed to be witnessed. Marcus stood with his arms at his sides. He was not rude. He simply did not participate, the way a person stands still during something they have decided not to engage with. Grant watched from the doorway with the careful attention of a man beginning to sense that the floor plan of this situation did not match the blueprints he had been given. Then Felicity walked toward me. She stopped at the end of my row and leaned in close enough that Renata beside me went very still. "Sasha," she said. Her voice was warm and practiced and precisely calibrated. "Thank you for everything you did for him. Truly. I know it wasn't easy and I appreciate you stepping up the way you did." She paused. "I'm here now though. We can figure out the rest together." I looked at her. I had 19 years of things I could have said at that moment. I chose none of them. Because I could see Marcus watching us from the staging area, his eyes steady and dark, his expression patient in the way it was patient when he had already made a decision and was simply waiting for the moment to execute it. So I looked back at my sister and I said nothing. I just nodded once slowly. And I turned back toward the stage. The ceremony opened with the principal's welcome, then remarks from the superintendent, then the school choir. The graduates crossed one by one in alphabetical order, name by name, handshake by handshake. When they called Marcus Allen Fitzpatrick, I stopped breathing. He walked across that stage the way he walked into every room, unhurried, straight-backed. He shook the principal's hand, took his diploma, found me in the 4th row and held my gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he walked to the podium. The graduation speaker slot had not been on the printed program. Marcus had asked the principal 3 weeks earlier for 5 minutes before the ceremony closed. She said yes without knowing what he planned to say. Neither did I. The gymnasium settled into the specific quiet of a crowd that has just realized the script has been set aside. He adjusted the microphone and looked out at the room. "Good morning," he said. His voice was clear and level, the voice of someone who had learned in 2 years of debate that the most powerful thing you can do is speak like you mean it. He thanked the faculty, acknowledged his classmates, said the expected things with enough warmth that the audience leaned in. He talked about what Bowling Green had given him. The teachers who stayed late. The debate coach who told him being right was not enough, that you had to make people feel why it mattered. Then he stopped. He looked down at the podium for a moment. When he looked up again, something in his expression had shifted. A settling, like a person who has arrived somewhere they have been walking toward for a long time. "There is someone in this room," he said, "that I need to talk about. Not a teacher. Not a coach. Someone who was 24 years old when she was handed a newborn and told that this was her responsibility now. She had a job she loved, a career she was building, a life that was entirely her own. She put all of it on hold without being asked twice." He paused. "She worked every day and came home to a baby who did not sleep. She bought formula when it went on sale and skipped grocery runs so his pediatrician bills got paid. She filed the legal papers herself and kept them in a drawer under her bed like they were the most important thing she owned, which they were." His voice did not waver. "She went back to school at night when I was 5 years old and got her license, and nobody from her family came to that ceremony. One friend showed up and cheered loud enough that I heard about it years later." Renata reached over and took my hand. "She taught me to argue a point without losing my temper," Marcus continued. "She taught me that being precise was more powerful than being loud. She taught me that the people who show up quietly, without applause, without anyone watching, are the ones who are actually doing the work. She came to every debate tournament, every parent conference, every awards assembly. She did not miss one. Not a single one in 19 years. He reached into his gown and removed the manila envelope. He held it up briefly, just long enough for the people near the front to see it, then he set it on the podium. "This is a legal document," he said. "It has her name on every line. It has been in a drawer under her bed since I was 6 months old. It is the most honest record of what a mother is that I have ever seen, because it was filed on a Tuesday afternoon with no audience and no reward and no guarantee that any of it would be recognized by anyone. Ever." The gymnasium was completely silent. The kind of silence that means 300 people have stopped thinking about anything except what is being said. "She is not the person who gave birth to me," Marcus said. "But she is the person who chose me. Every single morning for 19 years she chose me before she chose anything else. And I want her to know, in front of every person in this room, that I understand what that cost her. And I want her to know that it was not wasted." He looked directly at me. "Her name is Sasha Fitzpatrick. She's my mother." The gymnasium came apart. People were on their feet before the sound had finished leaving the room, clapping, some of them crying, the debate coach in the third row pressing his fist to his mouth. Renata was crying openly. The principal had her hand over her heart. I sat in my seat with tears running down my face and my hands folded in my lap, and I did not move because I could not. Not because I was sad. Because I was full. Completely, finally, entirely full. 3 rows behind me I heard Grant say something in a low voice. I could not make out the words, but I heard the tone. It was the tone of a man asking a question he already suspected the answer to. I did not turn around. I kept my eyes on my son at that podium with the legal papers in his hand and the gold tassel at his shoulder, and I let myself have the moment completely. Whatever came next, whatever my mother said, whatever Felicity explained or failed to explain to the man beside her, none of it could reach me in that moment. Marcus had said what was true. In front of 300 people he had said the simple, undecorated truth. And the truth, it turned out, was exactly the right size for that gymnasium on a warm morning in late May. It filled every seat. It reached every corner. And it left no room for anything else. The thing about a moment that changes everything is that life does not stop to let you feel it. The gymnasium empties. The folding chairs get stacked. The banner comes down. By 9 o'clock that evening, Bowling Green looks exactly the way it looked the morning before. Quiet streets, porch lights coming on, the ordinary machinery of an ordinary city doing what it always does. The extraordinary thing that happened inside that building does not show up anywhere on the outside. It just lives in the people who were there. I want to tell you what happened after. Not the dramatic version. Not the version where everything resolves cleanly in a single afternoon. The real version, which is messier and slower and in most ways more honest than any single scene could be. Grant Holloway left the gymnasium that day before the reception ended. I did not watch him go. I heard about it later from Carol, who called me 3 days after graduation in a voice I had never heard from her before, quieter than usual, stripped of its usual administrative certainty. She told me Grant had driven back to Nashville alone, that he had asked Felicity questions on the ride from the gymnasium to the restaurant, and that the answers to those questions had rearranged something fundamental in how he understood the person he was planning to marry. The engagement was not called off that day. It lasted another 6 weeks. Then it ended. Carol did not say this was Sasha's fault or Marcus's fault or anyone's fault. He just said it ended. That was the most honest I had ever heard my mother be about anything involving Felicity, and I recognized it for what it was even if she did not say the words directly. I did not feel triumphant when I heard that. I want to be clear about that because the triumphant version would be easier to tell and also completely untrue. What I felt was something closer to tired relief. The feeling you get when a storm you have been watching build on the horizon for years finally makes landfall and turns out to be survivable. Felicity's choices had consequences that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with the gap between the story she had been telling about herself and the story that was actually true. I had not created that gap. I had simply been living alongside it for 19 years. Marcus started at the University of Kentucky in Lexington that August on a merit scholarship that covered 60% of his tuition. He had been accepted to 4 schools and chosen UK because, as he told me when he made the decision, it was 2 hours from home and he wanted to be able to drive back on a Sunday when he felt like it. I did not tell him how much that meant to me. I told him it was a solid program and that the political science department had a strong reputation. He said he knew. He had done the research. Of course he had. Moving him into the dormitory on a Saturday in late August was one of the more disorienting experiences of my life. We had lived in the same square footage for 19 years, first the 1-bedroom on Chestnut Street, then the 2-bedroom we moved into when he was 7, always the same walls, the same kitchen table. Standing in his dormitory room with a box of his things in my arms and a roommate he had never met unpacking a desk chair across the room, I understood that the job I had been doing for 19 years had not ended. It had simply changed form. The daily architecture of it was gone. What remained was everything underneath. I drove back to Bowling Green alone that evening. The apartment was clean and quiet in a way it had not been in years. I made dinner for one and sat at the kitchen table and looked at the chair across from me. Then I got up, went to the drawer under my bed, opened it. The manila envelope was still there, a little worn at the corners now, the edges soft from years of handling. I did not open it. I already knew what it said. I just held it for a moment, the way you hold something you are getting ready to put down for the first time, and then I put it back. Felicity called me in October. Not Carol as an intermediary. Felicity herself from a Nashville number, on a Tuesday evening when I was grading continuing education modules for a recertification I was working toward. I almost did not answer for the same reason I almost did not answer the first time she called years ago, because a call from Felicity had never once in my life been about me or Marcus in any way that was actually true. But I answered. She did not have a script this time. The polished, calibrated quality was gone from her voice. What was there instead was something rawer, less managed. The voice of someone who had recently had significant things removed from their self-understanding and had not yet figured out what to put in the gap. She said she had been thinking. She knew that was not enough, that thinking was not the same as doing and doing was not the same as being there, and that being there was the only thing that had ever mattered and she had not done it. She was not calling to ask for anything. She just wanted me to know that she understood or was beginning to what I had done and what it had cost. I listened without filling the silences. She needed to find the words herself, and I had spent enough years finding words for people who could have found their own. When she finished, I told her I appreciated her calling. I told her Marcus was at UK and doing well and that if she wanted to be in his life, the door she needed to knock on was his, not mine. He was 19. That choice was entirely his. She said she knew and that she had already sent him a message. I asked what he said. She was quiet for a moment. He said he was open to it. Fully. On his terms. I told her that sounded exactly right. We talked for 20 more minutes about small things. Her job, which she was rebuilding. My recertification, which she asked about with what seemed like genuine curiosity. It was the most ordinary conversation I had ever had with my sister and also the most honest. I did not know what it was the beginning of. I was not going to assign it, meaning it had not yet earned. But I noted it. Carol came to Bowling Green in November. She called 2 days in advance and asked if she could come for lunch, which she had never done before. She arrived at noon on a Saturday carrying a dish she had made herself, the same casserole she used to leave on my counter without asking, but this time she set it on the table and sat down and did not reorganize anything. We ate lunch. She asked about Marcus and I told her real things, not summaries. His classes, the debate club he had already joined, the professor who had asked after the second week if he had considered pre-law. Carol listened with the attention of someone aware they have not been listening for a long time. It was imperfect. It was also real. She did not apologize. Carol Fitzpatrick was not built for explicit apology. What she offered instead was presence, imperfect and late and still meaningful in the way things can be meaningful even when they arrive after you stopped waiting. I accepted it for what it was. Not a resolution. Not an erasure. Just a door cracked open with uncertain light coming through. Marcus came home the first Sunday of December. He drove himself down the interstate and arrived at noon with a bag of laundry and a story about a debate tournament he had won the previous week that he told me in complete detail over lunch. He looked the same and entirely different, the way people look after their first real semester away, tested by something and clearer about their own dimensions. After lunch we sat on the back porch. Kentucky December, cold enough to need a jacket, clear enough to see the whole sky. Then he was quiet for a while looking at the yard. I let the silence sit the way I always had. Then he said, I talked to Felicity last week. I told him I knew. He glanced over at me. It was strange, he said. Good strange. Like talking to someone who is trying to figure out how to be honest for the first time. I told him that sounded about right. He nodded. I'm not in a hurry about it, he said. I told him there was no hurry. There was no deadline on any of it. He nodded again, satisfied, the way he was satisfied when something had been named correctly and did not need further discussion. We sat on that porch until the cold made staying impractical. Then we went inside and I made coffee and he told me more stories about UK and I listened to every word. Outside, the December light was doing what December light does in Kentucky, going gold and then gray and then gone. The short day closing down quietly over a city that did not know and did not need to know what had happened inside one ordinary apartment at one kitchen table, between a woman who had chosen a child 19 years ago and the young man that child had become. Some things do not need an audience to be real. Some things are real precisely because they never had one. That was us. That had always been us. And sitting there in that kitchen with my son across the table, I understood that everything that had been taken from me and everything I had given away and everything I had carried without being asked had led here, to this table, to this coffee, to this voice telling me about his life like I was the person he most wanted to tell. Which I was. I had always been. That was enough. It had always been enough. I just finally let myself know it. If this story made you feel something, don't just scroll away. There are so many stories out there that never get told, and here on Confire Stories we bring them to life. So if you enjoy emotional real-life drama like this, take a second to subscribe and be part of the journey. And if you've ever been in a situation like this, or have a story of your own, share it in the comments. I read them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.